Clendon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and kia ora koutou. Mr Speaker, it's interesting that New Zealanders seem to have an extraordinary close and intense relationship with their motor cars, and we've already heard evidence of that, and I'm already tempted myself to start telling stories of cars owned and those I would have liked to and wish I hadn't owned at different times. But it's true that, oh yes, it's true that we do have a particularly emotional attachment to these things, albeit they're only steel and rubber and glass. Nevertheless, we do engage in them, with them, at a different level than we do with other commodities and other home appliances, which is essentially what they can be reduced to. And for that reason alone, I guess it's important that we have adequate consumer protection around the buying and selling of motor cars. And this bill does take some steps closer towards that. Cars are named typically as being the second most expensive item that people will purchase after a home. In the age of $10,000 television sets, perhaps that's not quite as true as it once was, but nevertheless it is a significant investment, and for that reason we do need to endeavour to make sure that people are reasonably well protected when they do go out to purchase these quite expensive items. The car business has historically attracted its share of rogues, and perhaps even more than its share of rogues. It just seems to be one of those industries. And again, perhaps it's because of that emotional connection that people do feel with it. People get involved in the buying and selling of cars for all sorts of reasons, not all of them beneficial. And so it is good, I think, particularly the amendment in this bill that proposes or insists, in fact, that new management coming into a company must be named in order that people do have a clear sense of who it is that they're actually dealing with. It's interesting that it's very difficult to mount an argument that cars are actually an asset. In fact, they're a serious liability for most people. And business people are increasingly recognising that through choosing to lease rather than purchase these things. But nevertheless, for most people, it is still a major asset. I think it's valuable and important that the amendment in this bill proposing some attention to internet purchases of vehicles, that if it's possible to enter into a contract to purchase a car online, then there should be sufficient provision for accurate and complete identification and so on. I did a quick check some couple of weeks ago when it seemed this bill might actually come into the House. I did a quick check on that day and discovered on TradeMe something like 32,000 vehicles for sale, of which 25,000 were identified as private sales. So you've got about 7,000 vehicles on a given day available for sale from dealers. So clearly it's a significant medium these days for the purchase of vehicles, and it's important that this legislation around motor vehicle purchase does actually keep up with that reality, that more and more people are going to their screens and to their mouses in order to purchase vehicles, which is a mixed blessing in itself. Having said that, many of us have an emotional connection with cars, and I'm certainly one of those. My first car was also a 1948 vintage. I've recently having owned a car for 9 years, that ownership ended when a runaway truck destroyed it. I've gone back and bought a 1985 vehicle, made in New Zealand, I'm pleased to say, which I suspect will give many years of service. I would also look forward to a day when the emotional connection with cars will be reduced, because we will have options in the form of a fast, efficient, reliable, modern public transport system. Because I do think our attachment to cars is very much because historically they have given us a mobility that we haven't been able to achieve by other means, given the absence of investment over 50 or more years in modern, efficient public transport. At that point, I'll end my remarks. Kia ora koutou.
Well, time has come for lunch. I shall resume the chair at 2 p.m.